Welcome back to Kings of Columbus. Doug Lesmerises and Bill Landis talking defense on this show. Our plan for the next two episodes, Bill, defensive depth chart breakdown, first team and second team for 2025. Then next week on Kings of Columbus, we'll do the same thing for the offensive side of the ball. We're also taking questions from our tech subscribers, kind of about the side of the ball, but also if they just wanted to work in some other random other stuff, we're going to go through a little bit of that as well. It'll mostly be the depth chart breakdown, though. You did the work for that, right?
I did do the work for that. Yes, I have took a step.
I didn't do squat. Yeah. I did nothing. 614-662-4509. You want to be a tech subscriber. We'll start with Matt Patricia, though. This is a little newsier than we usually get on Kings of Columbus. Austin Ward and Jeremy Birmingham have a snap judgments up on the YouTube channel for the podcast. If you want to get their reaction to it, official. Is it official? Ohio State hasn't sent anything out yet as we record this.
Ohio State actually
Wednesday, right?
Ohio State hasn't officially announced any of the staff stuff yet, offense or defense. So no, it's just reported. But we have confirmed it.
I mean, Pete Thamel from ESPN. It's like the honorary.
Yeah, it might as well be an Ohio State press release.
Yeah. Honorary SID. So Matt Patricia, former defensive coordinator for the New England Patriots, is now the defensive coordinator for the Ohio State Buckeyes. This came out as we were recording live on Wednesday on Kings of the North at the end of that show. So you and I discussed it in part there. We know there is part of this audience here on Kings of Columbus who may have seen that. We know there was a large part of this audience that didn't see that. So this will be, we only can have so many thoughts about one thing. It's the same thoughts. I asked us 1 to 10 what we thought of the hire. I said a 6.5. I'm kind of like okay with it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't love it. I get it. I get the idea more than I get the actual dude. You are not quite as high though on a scale of 1 to 10 on what you thought.
No, I'm a 4. I have like both eyebrows raised at it, I guess. But a 4 is like leaving the door open for like, of course it can work. I don't want to like give it a 0 and pretend like this is an abject disaster that'll never work. Like I want to be fair, I guess, and leaving the door open to this being a successful tenure for Matt Patricia at Ohio State. It's just not at all where I thought Ryan Day was going to go. Like I'm sort of with you, and like the idea to me makes sense. The guy does not. We can get into some of the questions I have. I texted some of them out yesterday, admittedly in a pretty hot manner, but I don't back off of anything that I said or what I think about Matt Patricia. But yeah, so I'm at a 4.
That's about where our texters are. So this was, we're recording soon after this was announced. More than 300 votes. Scale of 1 to 10, what do you think? 4.18 is where our texters are. So, and this is like, I don't want to act like people don't have their own ideas about things, but you were hot about it on Tuesday. And I think the fact that you don't like it, and when you and Austin and Zach Boren talked about it on the Rooster Show on Tuesday, nobody really liked it. I'm sure it's having some influence on because we just have people who are going about their lives. They don't know every single in and out of Matt Patricia. Probably had some influence, but I think it's worth revisiting just like super, super briefly. None of you guys liked it when you were talking about it. There wasn't like anybody who was like, no, I think this was okay.
Yeah, I don't think so. I was probably the strongest. And I'm not like typically that strong with my opinions. But I just have a lot of questions about this one, but I don't think anyone was like, yeah, great hire. Like none of the 4 of us who were talking about it at the time, I think felt that way.
Yeah. Okay. There's one part of this that we may as well address now, that is certainly part of this story. And I do think we talked about it on KOTM, but I've coalesced my thoughts a little bit about this, that when Matt Patricia was hired by the Detroit Lions as their head coach in 2018, I don't know if the Detroit News was the first to come out with this. The story kind of reads that way. The Detroit News unearthed the idea that Matt Patricia and a college football teammate were charged with rape in 1996. But it never went to trial because there was an indictment, but then the accuser did not want to testify. according to this Detroit news story, and it never went any further than that. Good reporting around this. If you want to read the story for yourself, Matt Patricia indicted, not tried in 96 sex assault is the headline on this Detroit news story. They talked to the lawyers that were involved back then. Matt Patricia's lawyer claims the entire thing was fabricated. And the other side of it is that the woman didn't feel like, according to this story, that she would be able to testify and go through all of that. And so there was no trial.
Right.
So that was not known as he was at least it was not publicly known. Who knows what was known or unknown within the confines of a building or a hiring process. It was not known to the Lions, who did a background check. It was not known when he was hired, but then they talked to Patricia or whatever after he was hired, and this story came out, and they still hired him. This is the thing that I've added since we did KOTN. This is always a very difficult situation when you're charged but not tried. You're innocent until proven guilty, but also it's not nothing, right? I do think this is a different consideration when you are hired to be around college students as opposed to when you are hired in the big bad world of millionaires in the NFL. And it's at least a slightly different consideration to me in that process. To me, it does not mean that Matt Patricia should never be able to get a job again. But how do you view this as a college hire as opposed to the NFL jobs he's had for 2 decades?
Yeah, I think there's a distinction there. I'm with you that I don't think it should prohibit him from getting a job anywhere else, and it didn't, clearly. And there's some gray area there too. I think too. It's not a straight sort of black and white situation. I guess I would just assume that Ohio State vetted it, and I'm sure Ryan Day will get asked about that when he is asked to talk about the hire, or perhaps Ross Bjork should address whether or not they vetted that particular situation. So I think it is something that requires certainly more due diligence than the Detroit Lions seem to do when bringing him in to coach college-aged athletes on a college campus. But aside from that, yeah, I don't know. And the stuff that I texted out really didn't have anything to do with that. My questions are a lot more football related and interpersonal relationships related. But it's something to get out there, I guess. This is as I said on KTN, this is in his past. However you choose to digest that information, it's there. And Ohio State, I would hope at the very least, vetted it properly before making this decision.
Ohio State needs to be asked about that. What was your process for determining that you were comfortable with the facts of the situation from then that allowed you to hire this person? Which would and again, the NFL employs and hires people who are convicted of things. The NFL. Sure.
Yeah,
but I do think that's an important distinction, and you're bringing this person onto a college campus, and then this would be no different than if you're hiring a professor or someone to work in any capacity around young people on a college campus. And if there is something, you have to at least check into it. So that needs to be stated for the record, and we certainly will ask Ohio State about that. The rest of this stuff, so the football side of it, I usually in these situations, when I am apprehensive usually about promoting from within, or at least it's not my first instinct. I always say you can't just point to the guy down the hall. What a miracle. The most qualified person on earth for this job works 100 feet away. What a coinky dink. It's great for everybody. That's my initial reaction to almost any internal hire, realizing of course that it happens sometimes. So then what I usually say is best man for the job. I want best man for the job, not guy down the hall. Of course, there's another area somewhere between best man for the job and guy down the hall. I think if you're Ohio State and you're not going with the familiar, with the resources that you have and the fact that everybody wants to work here, you should be able to get the best man for the job. So I do think I don't think Matt Patricia is the best man for the job. He's not the most qualified person that they could have gotten, because the most qualified person you would be taking him from a current job, not from the I don't have a job line. So As much as I like sort of appreciate the fact that it's not just the easy internal hire, I wouldn't pretend it's best man for the job.
No, I wouldn't either. And so the thing that's difficult for me, I guess, just to get into it, is separating the success of Matt Patricia as the Patriots defensive coordinator, which he did from, I guess he did it from 2010 to 2017. He officially had the title from 2012 to 2017, but Pete Thamel in his story said that Patricia was calling the plays as early as 2010 without the title, and Belichick liked to do that to shield young coordinators and young play callers away from criticism. So 8 years or 9 years, whatever it was, of calling plays for the Patriots, 2 of which were Super Bowl years. He won a 3rd Super Bowl as like an offensive analyst, I think, earlier on in Belichick's tenure. So like you can and probably should, like, and I think in the reporting was like Super Bowl winning defensive coordinator Matt Patricia. Like, he is that. That's a fact. But I don't know how much of that was due to him and how much of that was he was working under the greatest defensive coach maybe the NFL has seen.
Right.
And what's guiding me, I guess, more toward it having a whole lot more to do with Belichick than it did with Patricia is the fact that Patricia, after he was fired by the Lions, had 3 coaching cycles in the NFL to be hired by somebody else as defensive coordinator in a league that routinely recycles bad coaches. Like Bill Davis, like, kept getting hired. I don't think Bill Davis is a good football coach, and I think Ohio State fans will probably agree. Nobody hired him. Nobody tried to hire him. So why? Is it because they don't like him? Because they think he stinks? Some combination of the both? Because whatever, maybe he was interviewing and it didn't just quite work out. Like, I don't know. But if you're a quote unquote Super Bowl winning defensive coordinator, that, like, a lot of people I feel like are acting like Ohio State should be thankful for him even being willing to take the job. It's like, well, why wasn't he hired in the NFL? Like, that's the part that's a little hard to square for me. And maybe that's the wrong way to view it, but that's the way I come at it. And you add on top of that the stuff that came out of Detroit where, like, players didn't like playing for him and coaches didn't like working for him. And I just don't understand why this is the guy that Ohio State had to hire.
Yeah. There are, I'm just looking through the list on Wikipedia of like the current defensive coordinators. There are a lot of college defensive coordinators currently employed whose previous job was a college defensive play caller coordinator at another place. And that's kind of what I was more thinking, right? Like, I think Bryant Haynes at Indiana got a big raise. Indiana's throwing money around, like, to their credit. Mm-hmm. That was a guy, like, if they, like, didn't his name come, just like, it's, you know, like, oh, who could Ohio State get? Like, if it's like, oh, I'm going to get Indiana's defensive coordinator. He's done it. They just had success. Like, that seems like a good hire. Like, you just look at some of these situations, right? Like Blake Baker, LSU's defensive coordinator. LSU hired him in 2024. They threw $2.5 million at him to get him to leave Missouri. That was like a big time hire. Kane Womack and Maurice Linguist, the co-defensive coordinators at Alabama, were both sitting head coaches in college football when Alabama like lured them away. And I think, and Womack at least certainly had play calling defensive experience before that, right? There's a couple other good examples here. This is not dissimilar from the Notre Dame hire, though. Chris Ash, who once upon a time was a successful defensive coordinator, then kind of like failed as a head coach, kind of went through the cycle, was kind of bouncing around. And that's where Notre Dame landed. And he was not exactly, I don't know that he was unemployed. He wasn't super employed. Wasn't he a scout? An NFL scout most recently?
For the Jaguars, I think.
Yeah. Washington this offseason hired Ryan Walters, the failed Purdue head coach who had been a really good defensive coordinator at Illinois. Like, something like that, I think, just would have made probably like a little more sense to me. Joe Rossi at Michigan State, they stole him from Minnesota a couple years ago, right? Corey Heatherman, Miami just stole Corey Heatherman from Minnesota. This cycle, Zach Alley, West Virginia stole him from Oklahoma. That's a new hire. Like Robert Livingston at Colorado, who just got a new deal at Colorado. Like, that would have been an interesting hire for Ohio State. Jay Hill at BYU would have been an interesting hire for Ohio State. There's just, I don't want to break, like, just read a list because that's not good podcasting. Tony White was the Nebraska defensive coordinator last year. Florida State just took him and hired him away. Clemson just hired Tom Allen away from Penn State to be their defensive coordinator. Of course, Ohio State with Jim Knowles. Like, that's just kind of more what I'm saying, Landis. I want somebody for Ohio State with experience, but probably also who was gainfully employed as a play caller the day before he took the Ohio State job, not a guy who was unemployed.
Yeah, like who else? Who are you in competition with to land this guy?
Yeah.
And I think in this particular case, the answer was nobody. And that's probably the case with Chris Ash too, to be fair, I guess, if you want to lump another team in there. And I'm not even saying like, I've seen a decent amount of like you're putting too much into the fact that he was a failed head coach in Detroit. And like, there's probably some truth to that, but that's honestly not how I view it, because there are plenty of guys who flamed out as head coaches who then get hired like immediately to be coordinators again in the NFL.
Ryan Walters on the college example. Ryan Walters flamed out as a head coach as bad as you can flame out. And Jed Fish at Washington was on him, bang, immediately. Like, I want that guy to be my DC. And to your point, that's not on the NFL level what happened.
Like there are countless examples of guys like just being a head coach wasn't right, but they're a really good coordinator. Like I am aware of that.
Matt Eberflus flamed out with the Bears. He just got hired to be the Cowboys defensive coordinator immediately.
There's a bunch of them. I'm looking through Steve. I'm just going to Steve Wilkes, Jim Schwartz, Vance Joseph, Matt Eberflus, Dennis Allen, Brian Flores, who was in New England, Todd Bowles, Robert Saleh was just hired, right? Like, it happens all the time. And 3-time Super Bowl champion Matt Patricia was sitting there, and no one.
Right. Yeah, we'll ask that. We'll ask Matt Patricia. Why were you not hired as a full-time defensive coordinator by another NFL team after you were fired in Detroit?
Or even if you don't want to hire him immediately after he was fired in Detroit, there were 2 other cycles. He got a job with the Eagles as like an assistant to an assistant.
Right. And then became the defensive play caller out of desperation and did a poor job.
Yeah.
And then they hired a new, different defensive coordinator for this season. And that guy, who was it? That guy did a good job.
Vic Fangio? Yeah, it's great.
Oh, Vic Fangio.
Yeah.
Can the Ohio State get Vic Fangio? Would that be good? Let's get Vic. So anyway, why do you think Ryan Day did this? If we're getting inside Ryan Day's head.
I think he really wanted a quote unquote head coach of the defense, which I don't think means you have had to have previously been a head coach, but maybe he really believes that. Which is not off base, I guess, if you can find it. Like Jim Knowles had been a head coach at Cornell briefly. But I think that matters, or it can help. I think I wonder about the Patriots thing. Ryan Day loves the Patriots. I'm sure he loves Bill Belichick. I think has probably some affinity for Matt Patricia for being the defensive coordinator of a team that won 2 Super Bowls. I actually was reminded, I'd forgotten about this. Somebody sent me a thing to it on Twitter. Ohio State's 2018 Pro Day. So Ryan Day was on staff, but Urban Meyer was still the head coach. Bill Belichick was there that day, and I took a video and posted it on Cleveland.com because it was Bill Belichick running Ohio State's defensive linemen through drills while Matt Patricia, who had just gotten hired as a Lions head coach, was like holding the bag and like helping coach guys through it too.
Oh, okay.
You know who else was holding the bag was Brady Hoke, which was kind of weird.
Oh, really?
he was there too. Yeah, it was like Bill Belichick coaches while Matt Patricia and Brady Hoke hold tackling dummies. So I don't know, and like I think Ryan Day values NFL when he can find it. Like clear, like you know his 2 OC hires last offseason were both guys with NFL in their backgrounds. Jeff Hafley, his first, and Greg Madison both were in the NFL when he hired those guys. And the one time he got burned on a bad coordinator hire, even then, like Kerry Combs had NFL experience. So I think that probably matters too. So there's a lot of things that I suppose point at Ryan Day in this direction. And again, like the profile of like NFL experience, play calling experience. Like I don't have any problem with the profile. It's just like I don't know if this is the guy I would have tapped necessarily when trying to find somebody who had that profile.
So, like Joe Cullen was a name that, for whatever reason, had been out there.
Yeah,
right.
Chiefs defensive line coach. Yeah,
Chiefs defensive line coach. Looking at his resume, he's listed as being the Indiana defensive coordinator in college in 2004. had been that at Richmond. So at least had called plays a little bit way in the past and has been a defensive line coach in the NFL for a long time, but certainly does not have the coordinating experience of Patricia, but was gainfully employed by a Super Bowl team. It currently still is. Would he have been better?
Yeah, I like more palatable, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I would have preferred that, I guess. The other really the only like three names that ever were out there publicly were Cullen, Patricia, obviously, who just got hired, and Randy Bates. But I don't know how real the Randy Bates stuff was. I think that was mostly just an agent doing a good job. I don't think that was ever a real consideration for Ryan Day.
But would you have taken Randy Bates over Matt Patricia, though? Current defensive coordinator, happens to be an OSU alum, but is calling the defense for a pretty good defense?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. So, okay. I think it is we have very reasonable questions to ask. And so,
I think if like all of my concerns are just totally off base, where it's like Matt Patricia is a defensive mastermind and the stuff about players and coaches not liking him when he was in Detroit, that's like in his past and he's a little different and knows how to handle people better, then like I could, and if like, I'm concerned about that and you're not, and all your focus is on like maybe this guy's going to do some cool stuff with Ohio State's defensive front and be more multiple up there. You got Matt Guerreri as passing game coordinator and Tim Walton as co-DC now as part of this move. Like those guys are still like doing a lot of the same back end stuff that Jim Knowles was doing. Like I can see why people would be excited about that. I'm not trying to be entirely dismissive of that. I just have some real questions about why this guy now, and like because it was a seemingly like a pretty well thought out process for Ryan Day, and one that he didn't really rush his way through.
No.
And then it ends with Matt Patricia, which I don't like. It's fine that no one saw it coming, I guess, because like I don't think anybody saw Bill O'Brien or Chip Kelly coming until it happened. So like the surprise nature of it is not inherently bad. It's just I am unsure if this is actually the right fit. And I guess you can say that about any hire until you actually see it in practice on the field. But I don't know. There's just a lot of questions that I think maybe should have steered Ryan Day in a different direction.
So I think there's a multitude of reasonable questions. I don't think he's incompetent.
Right? No, I don't think he's incompetent. No, I don't think you accidentally like coordinate a defense that wins Super Bowls, right? Even if you are getting your hand held, by Bill Belichick. And I'm not saying like to what extent that happened, I don't know. But that's part of the hurdle for me here. No, I don't think he's incompetent. No.
And we talked about this on KOTM, like even if he's cutting and pasting the Belichick defense in here, because I think it'll be some things that Ryan Day, I don't think Matt Patricia's established enough, especially because he didn't really have a job, for him to be like, we're doing it my way. I don't think Ryan Day is going to be like cool with that. I think Ryan Day is going to say, these are the principles that we want to adhere to. We want to keep some things that we did under Jim Knowles, Matt Guerreri, and Tim Walton, and these guys were here under that. They'll help you with that. You can bring a lot of your ideas, but even if his ideas are Bill Belichick ideas, okay, like he didn't come up with it, that's fine. If he can apply it, I'm not as worried about
Bill Belichick's ideas. Nick Saban worked out well for him.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So even like Josh McDaniels went and didn't exactly make it as a head coach, right? When he left the Patriots, well, he was opposite side of the ball, right? And his might have just been like, well, maybe your offense was never really that good, but like Tom Brady was running it. But it doesn't mean. But again, Josh McDaniels failed as a head coach. He's not the head coach. So like culture, do players not like him as a head coach? Like all of that, I'm not really that concerned about. We have to make sure Ohio State thoroughly vetted him correctly. But then just to be the DC, I think there's a chance to be fine. But I would be more comfortable if they had hired Corey Heatherman. Miami stole Corey Heatherman from Minnesota. Why didn't Ohio State steal him? Right? Go steal. And Tom Allen got stolen by Clemson. Why didn't Ohio State steal? Like of course that wouldn't have happened because that's how Knowles got to Penn State. But anyway, you know what I mean? Like just go steal.
Yeah.
Like who's the best coordinator in college football right now? Who's the best defensive coordinator? Go get him. Because guess what? That's what they did last time. That's what they did. And it was Jim Knowles when they hired him the first time.
And part of it too is just like you want a guy who's on the up, right? Not on like, and I don't know, like Patricia, I guess is on the way down, or at the very best,
for sure,
stagnant. Like I don't. And
His
like I
career's
know, like
been a turd show for 6 years.
Austin and Berm like talked about on Snap Judgments, like Ryan Day taking up the mantle of Nick Saban to be the island of misfit toys for coaches who got fired. It's like, you don't have to be that. No one, that's the world doesn't need that. You don't,
Yeah.
unless you like, I'm not saying it's bad to want to be that. If you see like, and I think there is some value in there, but also wouldn't like Nick Saban like hire those guys and shove them in a broom closet and make them watch film for 2 years before they became coordinators? Like, this is just like, this has gone like 2 steps beyond that. Which is not to say that it's like it could work. It could be fine, as you're saying. It could be great. Like, I could be totally wrong. Wouldn't be the first time, but I just I don't know. It's a far more questionable decision than I was anticipating Ryan Day making. I find it to be fairly risky, but it doesn't mean that it's automatically going to fail. So we'll see.
I'll be curious if Ryan Day says, I was looking for NFL experience. I was like looking for somebody from the NFL, which would mean that like, well, he was never going to hire Randy Bates or Bryant Haynes or or Corey Heatherman or anybody like that because he wanted NFL experience. And if that's the case, why? Because then you're limiting your pool. Because again, like you're not going to get a sitting DC in the NFL to come to Ohio State. You're either going to get a position coach. Again, Robert Livingston was a position coach with the Bengals when Deion Sanders hired him to be the coordinator at Colorado, and that's worked out really well. If Ryan Day had done that, I probably would be saying, "Hey, you never like this guy never called plays before." But like, I get it, right? But if you have an NFL requirement, you're limiting your pool in a very specific way. So it's either guy who's never done it and is an NFL position coach, or a guy who's done it but doesn't have a good job right now. So that's where Matt Patricia falls in. So anyway, I'll be very. I would think so. I'm a 6.5. You're a 4. The fans are a 4.2. I will have my ears open. I think Ryan Day could explain me into an 8.
Yeah, probably.
If he really has a thought process and something of like, and the thing that I texted this to subscribers the other day, I don't know. And also our antenna are always up, as you said, with Ryan Day and the Patriots. Ryan Day worked at Boston College for like 6 years while Matt Patricia was working with the Patriots. I don't know if they hung out. I don't know if the Boston College guys and the Patriots guys.
I'm sure they have a previous relationship.
So I would imagine that's some little tiny part of that. The folks don't like it. So as we said, it's a 4.18. It's now gone down to a 4.16. What do you think of Ohio State hiring Matt Patricia as DC? My choice is Landis. It's fine. I would vote it's fine. That's the middle. Yeah. Like it, love it. Don't like it, hate it. Right? Are the other 4 options. What would you vote? I would vote middle. I would vote fine.
I would vote don't like it.
Okay, but you wouldn't vote hate it.
Not quite.
Okay.
But pretty close.
Don't like it, 34%. It's fine, 27%. Hate it, 25%. Like it, 11%. Love it, 3%. So a quarter of the people are in the middle. And then the rest of it, only 14% are on the good side. And 61% are on the bad side. No. I apologize. 59% are on the bad side. 27% it's fine. 59% the bad side, 14% the good side. That's not a great ratio for a huge hire.
It's not for a coach that I think had a lot of goodwill to like.
Yeah,
you have to factor into that. Some people on the good side of that just doing it by default because they were happy with Ryan Day.
Right. Like, I trust this guy, and I don't think. Should Ryan Day be trusted on these hires? And you and I have gone over it at times. It's like, again, I think most of the time when Ryan Day's gotten in trouble is because he's hiring too familiar, right? Making it too easy. Even Kerry Combs. If Matt Patricia is a little familiar, Kerry Combs was more familiar, right? So, do you think Ryan Day deserves hey, I trust Ryan Day to make this hire if you're an Ohio State fan?
Yeah, probably for the most part. If you just look at the coordinator side of things, like, he's done well more often than he's totally. He really only missed once on the coordinator front with Kerry Combs. Like, his initial coordinator hires were good. The Jim Knowles hire was great. Your
situation didn't really work out, but your situation was but that was coordinator.
That wasn't even 2023 was Ryan Day was still the offensive coordinator, but then Chip Kelly was great. So, Yeah, I think he's earned some trust.
Yeah.
A little bit, yeah.
What should Ohio State have done at defensive coordinators was the third question I asked. Hired a different outside experienced DC, 78%. Promoted Tim Walton to full-time DC, 11%. Hired Matt Patricia, 11%. So again, this is like a lot of people like the idea of not internal. And I only put Tim Walton, not Matt Guerrieri, because Tim Walton, according to the Thamel report, is going to be promoted to co-DC and Matt Guerrieri is going to be passing game coordinator. So that to me is like, well, Walton's ahead of Guerrieri. So if they were going to promote somebody internally to defensive play caller, that to me tells me it would have been Walton, not Guerrieri.
Well, I guess so. I do find it a little odd that Ryan Day said what he said about Matt Guerrieri at the championship celebration, and then this is where we ended up. I thought he was tipping his hand there when he said Matt Guerrieri is like one of the brightest young minds in college football. I'm telling you, or something like that. Like,
yeah,
on the day that Jim Knowles was packing his bags for State College, it's like, okay, well, this is who the DC is going to be. So,
I would have liked that less than this. I'll take Patricia over promoting Guerrieri to play caller. You would have taken Guerrieri. You would have taken Guerrieri. You were okay with Guerrieri.
I was okay with Guerrieri. Yeah, or like a Guerrieri Walton combo. Yeah.
I would have been nervous about.
I do think it makes more sense though to have like Patricia. I would say that Patricia's like expertise is more front end. So like to bring in a guy like that, like and Joe Cullen, I guess would have been the same thing, like front end, back end guy.
Yeah. So I feel bad, and like if it just would have been, hey, we won the national championship with like arguably the best coordinator on both sides of the ball in college football, right? Mm-hmm. It's not a slam dunk, but could you have argued that last year, Chip Kelly and Jim Knowles, resume and production?
Yeah.
And then, we just promoted a bunch of guys. We're all good. That would have made me nervous. And that would have made me nervous from like a procedural standpoint too, of like Ryan Day smelling himself and like, it doesn't even matter who the coordinators are. I'm just going to promote my friends and win it again. That's where I would have been. So this is not that. So I'm like theoretically in for sure.
Had Chip not been offered $6 million by the Raiders and was still going to be Ohio State's offensive coordinator this year, do you think he would have promoted Matt Guerrieri to defensive coordinator?
Possibly.
Yeah,
I think he's aware. A staff is a thing unto itself, right?
Yeah, it's a living, it's like a living organism. Yeah,
it's a living organism. It's like those 10 guys, background, NFL, small college. Age, how long they've done it, who's a great technician, who's a great recruiter, all that stuff. You're constantly, when you pull one piece out, it affects everybody else. And you are constantly putting that puzzle back together. So I agree with that's a good point by you. That's what I think. All right. Stressful. Crazy. We have a lot of questions to ask. I haven't been going to a lot of news conferences. I feel like I should go to this one because I feel like there's
I don't know. I wonder when it'll be, because typically we've done something on the original signing day, but that's past. That was last week. And spring ball doesn't start till the 17th, so might not be until then.
Yeah. Also might be worth reaching out to Ohio State, to Bjork and other people about the vetting process. Like we need answers on that sooner than later, just in the name of being around young people. Okay. You want to do depth chart, brother? You want to do this?
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's do it. We'll start on the defensive line. This is the Bill Landis projected Ohio State defensive depth chart for the 2025 season. I have some input from tech subscribers that we will throw in along the way, and we will start with the defensive line. Who do you think the starters are going to be?
Okay, so for the starters, this is fairly straightforward, I think. So the ends, I have Kenyatta Jackson and Caden Curry, both fourth-year guys who have been the primary backups, stepping up now to be starters. And the tackles, I have Caden McDonald and Edric Houston.
Okay. Is Houston definitely going to be a tackle, not an end?
Yeah, I think so. They moved them there middle of the season this past year and kept him there, and I think he played well there. I think body type wise, it makes sense. I guess the question with all, so I stuck with what has been Ohio State's base defense the last 3 years under Jim Knowles. I guess that could be changing. Like maybe they're more of a 3 down front. And in that case, I guess Cedric Houston is probably more like technically of a defensive end than he is a defensive tackle. But in this 4 down iteration, he's like the 3 technique. He's the Draymond Jones of the operation.
Yeah. Tyleik Williams. Like we've seen what these guys look like, right? Like these pass rushing defensive tackles who can blow up pockets next to a
Pascal
nose
Garrett.
guard.
Yeah.
If they do go to more of a 3-4 look, is he not like almost an ideal like strong side defensive end in a 3-4?
Yeah, I think he would fit that role pretty well. I think Caden McDonald would be a good like nose in the middle. Maybe they don't have another guy like Caden McDonald to quite do that. Like maybe that you would have to potentially try to find another body type, like nose body type to play there if they did go that route. I think what they'll end up being is not one or the other, but just multiple, and we'll see more multiplicity up front. But like maybe you wouldn't get a straight answer on whether or not you're a 4-3 or a 3-4.
What's your second team defensive line?
Here's where it gets interesting. Logan George at one of the end spots, the transfer from Idaho State. CJ Hicks is the other.
There you go.
And then Tywone Malone and Jason Moore at the tackle positions.
Okay. Tywone Malone transfer, like a lot of noise when he got here. Not a lot of opportunity to do much yet. You think he can still pop, or is this more like a rotational? They're going to play 6 tackles and he'll be in there.
I think he's more of a rotational piece. I think Jason Moore has some serious upside. He had a lot of buzz last spring that didn't materialize into as much playing time as I thought it was going to. It didn't really lead to much playing time at all for Jason Moore, but he's another guy who was like a high school defensive end, but body type wise is probably more of a defensive tackle in college. But if you're playing some 3-4, then he can play probably either. He's over 300 pounds. So I like Moore. He's just maybe he didn't pop the way I thought he would as a sophomore, but I think he has a pretty good chance to as a junior. And I think the guy that they miss a little bit, I think, is Hiro Kanu, who transferred to Texas, right? You want to talk about like a big body guy you could stick in the middle as a nose if you wanted to or you needed to. You would fit that bill, but it's like 6'5", 320. Like I thought he got outplayed by Caden McDonald by a fairly significant margin, and maybe he felt like there were some guys behind him who might be coming after him too, or maybe he just got paid a lot of money by Texas and went into the portal. But I would feel a little better about tackle if he were still here. I guess I think they have two pretty good ones at the top, but the depth is a little questionable at the moment.
Like overall, I mean, to think about, and you're losing the 4 starters from that group who were huge contributors for a very, very, very long time. Like, you feel pretty good about the defensive line for next year? Or do you have real questions?
I feel okay. I think I feel okay. I feel pretty good about tackle. I would like to see a 3rd or 4th tackle pop in the spring if possible. I thought Kenyatta Jackson played pretty well in the postseason, and I like the energy that Caden Curry plays with, and we'll have to see if the production that Logan George had at the FCS level translates. But if it does, then I think they're fine. He's a pretty disruptive player at that level. So, and then CJ Hicks is like a wild card. I do believe he's going to like fully move to defensive line. Especially if they're in a more, kind of hybrid, versatile front world with Matt Patricia. I think, if anyone's pretty excited about this development, it's probably CJ Hicks. Because I just think there's a lot to unlock there if you put him on the line of scrimmage. So, in terms of like raw talent, athletic ability up front, like he might be their best guy. If that transition takes away, I think it will.
This is Larry on the text service. How likely do you guys think it is that CJ Hicks moves to the edge, whether that's in a 3-4 look or as an outside linebacker or in a 4 down front? The best case scenario, he ends up as Abdul Carter 2.0. I would want to maybe back people off some of this. I do think there's a difference between like a guy like Micah Parsons and Abdul Carter and guys like that and I know Carter was an edge who kind of moved to linebacker, but when you have a super talented guy who is able to move around, that's different than like, this guy kind of hasn't hit at his first position, so now we're going to move him to somewhere else. So
Parsons and Carter were both pretty good off the ball. They were just better on the ball.
And it was like, we want to maximize these ridiculous skill sets as opposed to we want to find some way for this guy to contribute, and at his first position, it hasn't really happened yet. And isn't that a fair way to assess CJ Hicks as a linebacker? It didn't work.
The better comparison is probably Baron Browning, but Ohio State realizing it before it's too late.
Yes. Okay. Yes. But Browning was far more productive along the way of like them never.
He just played more. Like I don't know that he was better. He just played more.
Yeah. So okay. So you think CJ is like, do you think CJ Hicks will be a major contributor for Ohio State next year as an edge guy?
Yes.
Okay.
But
I'm circumspect.
Yeah, which is probably fair because I've thought that for 3 years now and it hasn't happened yet.
Right.
So
this is a question about Curry and Jackson. This is Ezra. How confident should I be in Curry and Jackson? No disrespect to them, but I don't think they've necessarily shown a top gear that some other guys have in their limited reps. To a layman like me, it looks like edge has the least high-end talent of anywhere on the defense. Could this finally necessitate a more multiple look? I went bonkers about Kenyatta Jackson in spring practice like 2 years ago. I think he is more of like I don't even know if traditionals, he's a bendier edge. Jack and JT were just different dudes, right? They're just both so physical, but they aren't like bend the edge, get to the quarterback type dudes as much. And I still feel like that's in Kenyatta Jackson. I still think they need to pull that out of him, but I think Kenyatta Jackson could have 10 sacks next year. Does that feel crazy to you?
Yeah, I would say that he's more similar to those guys than not. He's probably longer levered, like he's got like a bigger wingspan and probably like maybe broader shoulders than those guys do. But I think he's still a guy that probably does more with power than he does with speed, which would make him more similar to Jack. JT is actually pretty bendy. I know like none of them are Chase Young necessarily, but like JT could get after a little bit. So I like Kenyatta a lot. I think he's a pretty well-rounded defensive lineman who played. I think you've seen year over year progression from him too. Caden Curry is just very different. He's undersized. He's like motor and just doesn't stop moving around and is like kind of pesky more than he is flashy. But I think that can be effective. I don't know that Caden Curry can play whatever 700 snaps of edge, right? I think he's a guy you want to rotate a little more. But if you're in a 3-4 world, especially, I think you can afford to do that.
And I also think we'll be talking next year about like, wow, Jack and JT, we're really good against the run, right? Be one of those things like in retrospect that it's like you'll appreciate it more when it's gone. So it's but in terms of like the point that Ezra's making about like, I thought that Kenyatta Jackson did find a role this year and played like 350 snaps or whatever it was like really important because it felt like he just kind of didn't do much. And it's not his fault that Jack and JT came back when they could have been high draft picks. I think he would have been ready to play in year 3 as a starter, but I think he's definitely ready in year 4. And especially as it applies to Jackson, I would not view, and just Larry Johnson's weird sometimes. Like it just is what it is. Like sometimes it feels like he rotates too much, and then sometimes it feels like he rotates not at all. And so I don't look at Kenyatta Jackson's sort of like lack of snaps through 3 years as an indication that he can't play. It's just he got 2 foundational guys a year ahead of him who at times felt like they never left the field and stuck around for senior years and were excellent football players. But I think Kenyatta Jackson maybe is also excellent.
I think he's got a chance to be pretty darn good. Yeah. So I'm going to look. So he played 316 snaps this past year. That's pretty good. He played almost 100 more snaps than Caden Curry played because Mitchell Melton rotated in a decent amount. Mitchell Melton played 150 snaps. So, but I think that like that gets to the point of like Kenyatta Jackson will probably play the most defensive end snaps by a fairly significant margin. And then it's like, what do you do with that what is that other spot? And then like who plays there?
Right. Right.
which is probably like a mixture of Hicks and Curry. Maybe someone like Josh Mickens, who's like similar to Curry, like kind of unique in his build, but can be like a nice curveball to throw at an offensive line every now and then. Or maybe it's one of the young guys. Like I don't know enough about the freshmen to know like who might be ready to perhaps play early. But I think the Kenyatta Jackson spot is pretty solid, and then the other spot probably fairly has some questions, but I don't think it'll be bad.
Do you think Edric Houston could be a star next year?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
I think he'd be very good. Yeah.
This is a couple more defensive line questions from TF. Can this new defensive line pressure the quarterback effectively? And then from Jen R, how many sacks did Ohio State record during their playoff run? How many during the regular season? The D-line was on another level. Go Bucks, Jen R in North Carolina. So I double checked. I think this is right. Do you know how many sacks it was in the 4 playoff games?
I don't know. I never looked it up.
18?
Sounds right. Sounds right. Yeah. I think they were getting about 6 a game.
8, like 4, 8, 4, and 2. So to those points, though, and again, we talked about it multiple times, the 4-man pressure in the playoff that allowed Ohio State to harass quarterbacks without having to blitz was such a primary part of what they did. But then also behind it, you had like Jim Knowles, mad genius, dialing up these blitzes. They're not going to pressure the quarterback as well next year. Not as well as they did in the playoff, at least. Because again, part of Jack and JT and this, their career is like, they were close, but they never got home. And then in the playoff, when it mattered on the road to the national championship, they were tearing quarterbacks' arms off. It can't be as good as that. Maybe the defining thing in the playoff, what changed the most for Ohio State in the playoff, is probably like A, Will Howard and the passing game elevated, and B, they got 4-man pressure. There's no way it's going to be as good as it was in the playoff.
I agree with that because it's a high bar, but I don't think and I'm not trying to take anything away from how well the defensive line played because they played great. The way that they mix up their coverages has to be a part of the conversation. And because they're making the quarterback hold the ball longer. And if that's going to continue, then that's going to put this new defensive line in better position to generate pressure. And like that's something that Ohio State didn't really get to until the second half of this past season. And then it really all just kind of came together in the postseason. So I think there's an opportunity there via the marriage of the coverage and the pass rush to be more productive, maybe in the regular season or more consistently than the line was last year. But yeah, I mean, 18 sacks in 4 games. I wouldn't expect that, but I think it could be good. And I think perhaps the interior pressure could maybe even be a little better. I love Tyleik Williams. He's an absolute animal, but I think Edric Houston is probably has a chance to be a better interior pass rusher than Tyleik Williams and Ty Hamilton. And Caden McDonald's pretty freaky too. So they're young guys who have to like show they're ready for more snaps. I'm not trying to be dismissive of that idea. And Ty and Tyleik were very good, but I think the interior pass rush could be better.
Okay. And also in terms of mixing up coverages, what you're talking about, Patricia's more of a front guy. Tim Walton and Matt Guerrieri, even if Matt Patricia's calling it, should still be able to have a lot of influence in that. And that whatever worked in the playoff this year, from a coverage standpoint, they can make sure Ohio State's doing that effectively, even with the new DC.
So. Yeah, I think you'll find some continuity there. Yeah.
All right. So one of the other things I did across this is I was sort of running through the roster with the tech subscribers and talking about where Ohio State maybe could be better, actually, despite losing all these guys, where they could be better in 2025. So we'll work in a little bit of that. So let's move to the linebackers, Landis. And I am just going to throw this out here. From the 419, this person said they thought linebacker could be the most improved spot. I don't think it's close. It could be the most athletic linebacker room that we've ever had. And then this is Brian, who always has good stuff to say. If Sonny Styles improves in 2025 like he did in 2024, and Arvell Reese is different like he looks to be, that's the one position group outside of tight end that I can see taking a step forward, which is nuts because Cody Simon had an exceptional year. So anyway, there's a lot of hope around linebacker here, Landis. So who do you think is going to play?
I think it'll be Sonny and Arvell as the 2 starters. Sonny at Will, Arvell at Mike, although they could be a little more interchangeable there. Arvell's role was pretty streamlined in 2024. Like he was only a Mike linebacker and most often in 3 linebacker sets, at least like on the high leverage snaps anyway. And then the backup linebackers, I have Peyton Pierce, who's a second-year guy who played a decent amount this past year for a true freshman. And I have Riley Pettijohn. I have a freshman in there. Now, part of that is because I have CJ Hicks moving to the defensive line. Like if he wasn't, then I would have CJ Hicks in here as a second-team linebacker. I think Pettijohn, from an athletic profile, is pretty remarkable, and I think will be ready to play early. Maybe not dissimilar from Raekwon McMillan in 2014. I think he's gonna be very good. So, and like Peyton Pierce, I know like James Laurinaitis just loves him. So, and he played a decent amount on special teams. Like when Gabe Powers transferred, basically Peyton Pierce just like became Gabe Powers. He played all of Gabe Powers' special team snaps in the postseason. Played some as a backup linebacker. So I think he's in line to like be that next guy up at Mike. I think he's pretty smart. He's a little undersized, but I think he makes up for it with like football IQ and stuff like that. So I think those are the top 4. And then you have like Garrett Stover, who's the same class as Peyton Pierce. And then you have the other freshman, TJ Alford and Eli Lee. But I think that top 4 will be pretty good.
Yeah. And we're going to start seeing Pierce, Pettijohn, like these guys. It's the Laurinaitis recruiting in effect here now, right? But Sonny Styles was second on the team in defensive snaps last year behind Caleb Downs. Mm-hmm. How much can I guess the only leap for Sonny Styles now is like borderline All-American leap, right? But this is a 5-star who enrolled here early and is still like growing into it.
Yeah. First team All Big Ten, maybe being that All-American conversation. He got picked on a little bit by Texas trying to cover running backs. He can continue to get better, but I thought he showed tremendous progress throughout the entire season. Because we were like early on kind of wondering like, I don't know if this looks right for him. But then he got his feet under him about that. I think it was about that Iowa game, maybe Michigan State game. And I thought it was pretty good from there. And he's another guy too. Like it just depend on what direction Matt Patricia wants to take this. And I guess like my assumption at the moment as we're having this conversation is that Larry Johnson's going to be back as defensive line coach. So like the idea of being multiple up front, what kind of room is there to actually do that if Larry Johnson's still a defensive line coach?
I mean, if it didn't happen with Knowles, why would it happen now, right? That Larry Johnson repelled Jim Knowles' attempts to make them multiple for 3 years and now gives in to Matt Patricia. That'd be weird. Right.
But let's, I guess for the sake of the conversation, say that they do get a little more multiple up front. Then Sonny can also play up front a little bit too. So like he might have an opportunity to move around some more, continue to grow as an off-ball linebacker, but maybe add some more pass rushing backfield production to the ledger too if he's up on the line of scrimmage a little bit. I guess that could depend on like how Pierce and Pettijohn progress, because they would presumably be playing linebacker in place of him if he moves up some. But I think Sonny's got a real chance to blossom into a star after the year he had at linebacker in 2024.
Here a year early when he should have been in high school. Starting at safety when he kind of really wasn't a safety and always knew it. Moved to linebacker, first year in a new position, and it took him about half a year to kind of figure it out. And now it's year 4. Like this will be, for a guy who's contributed a lot, he's kind of hasn't been settled since he's been here. Right. And now he's going to be like one of the 2 or 3 leaders of this defense. And he's absolutely geared that way too. Like he's ready for all this stuff. I thought he's, even during some of the tough adjustments, he's always handled his business. And now he's going to be like a 3rd-year starter, 4th-year player who they're going to have to like look at with a new coordinator to be like a leader. I think he's more than ready for that. Right.
Yeah. He's steady. He's not like, he reminds me of like Jalen Hurts a little bit, where you're like, you never quite know what he's good. Like. What emotion is this person feeling right now? Because they're not giving it away with their facial expression or the way they're talking. But I think it's a good quality. It's good quality.
Very mature. Yeah. And then Arvell Reese could be a stud. Yes.
Yeah, I would say the same thing about him that I said about Sonny in terms of like versatility and potential to play up front. But he'll be the starting Mike linebacker, I believe, in the fall. It's weird. Like I think Arvell and Sonny will both be very good linebackers in college, but I could also see them both being more defensive ends in the NFL. We'll see how that progresses, especially Arvell. But I think Arvell Reese is ready. he like I had expected some growing pains because he didn't play linebacker his freshman year. He played defensive end. And then they moved him to linebacker. And in the spring, I was like, this guy's pretty good. And in the fall, I was like, this guy plays a lot. So I think he's ready to just take all those snaps that are on the table from Cody Simon. And maybe like Sonny might have to do some more of the communicating, but Arvell did some of that this past year too and seemed okay with it. So I think he's more than ready for it.
I think that Gabe Powers has a chance to be a pretty good college linebacker at Kansas State, and he's definitely going to start there. And I think I am taking some indication of the potential of Arvell Reese away from the fact that Arvell Reese just like took that job, and Gabe Powers was like, oh, I guess I better transfer if I want to play. Like, I think you have to be pretty good.
Fair. I would
as a younger
read
guy.
The same way. Yeah.
All right, let's go to the third level of the defense, which is the downs backer. This is Nick, newer member, but love the show and love the Buckeyes. Is it weird that I'm zero concerned about the defensive coordinator since we have Caleb Downs for another year? Do we think that Caleb is in on the interviews or at least giving his input, considering Knowles and Day had to sell him to even come here? So Nick sent that before the Matt Patricia hire, but we're just talking about Caleb Downs as an individual part of the defense. This is Jason. Do you think we will see Caleb in the rover position again? I know a lot depends on the new DC, but he is a generational talent. Yes, overused word, but it does apply to him. We were unstoppable letting him freestyle, read, and attack. So I don't even know how you have a backup to Caleb Downs because like he does.
Yeah.
But are we going to see that? The thing that we all fell in love with together of him in that role in the middle of the defense, stopping the run, disrupting the pass, being able to blitz, being able to drop in coverage. It felt like Jim Knowles really found something with him in the second half of the year. Will they keep doing it?
It'll depend on whether or not the guy they have playing the nickel position can play the deep half, the way that Jordan Hancock did. So I think they'd like to get them more of that. It is interesting. Like we talked a lot about that, and I was like very into it, and then started to ask a little bit about it, and then right at that point, like they didn't do it as much. Like they didn't do it quite as much against Texas and Notre Dame as they did against Tennessee and Oregon, and that's probably that's your game plan specific. So I understand that. Caleb Downs will play closer to the line of scrimmage no matter what, because he'll either do the stuff that we fell in love with, or he'll still be like in the box safety, not dissimilar from like Lathan Ransom, right? So he'll be around the ball a lot. I'm not worried about that. Whether or not it will look exactly how it looked last in the playoff structurally will depend on, I suppose, Lorenzo Styles Jr. starting in nickel, and whether or not he can do or show some of the same versatility that Jordan Hancock did, which allowed it to happen.
So let's go ahead and start the first team defense again. What you project in the secondary, all 5 spots there, assuming they keep some version of this.
So Davis and Igbinosun returning as a starter at corner. Jermaine Matthews as the other starting corner. Caleb Downs and Jalen McClain as the 2 starting safeties, and Lorenzo Styles Jr. as the nickel. And he was like the dime back this year and was clearly the backup to Jordan Hancock. So I think that's pretty well set. I get the one thing, I think Zach Boren said this, and I can't remember if he said it on the show or if he said it when we weren't recording, but it caught my ear, and I apologize if he said it when we weren't recording, but it's not like inflammatory. But he floated the idea of maybe Davis and Igbinosun playing nickel. And like using some of that length and physicality, and then maybe you then invite the opportunity for Aaron Scott, Bryce West, or true freshman Devin Sanchez to start a corner opposite Jermaine Matthews, which is like, I can get behind that idea, I think, if that's the way they want to go with it. But I think they clearly like Lorenzo at the nickel.
So let's show your second team before we get into this a little bit more.
Sure. So the second team I projected is Bryce West and Devin Sanchez at the outside corners, Aaron Scott at the nickel, and then Malik Harford and Leroy Roker as the safeties.
Okay. The Fong, our guy. Wouldn't moving Davison Igbinosun to Jordan Hancock's position just make sense? He'd have to play more run support, but it's clear he doesn't mind playing physical, sometimes too physical. Why not turn a weakness in his game into a strength? So the thing about Davison Igbinosun is like he's got length and he's got like the prototypical outside corner's body, but like we know what the deal is. I didn't know that Zach had said this. John also said, asking about the nickel. This nickel thing, I think, is this a big deal? Because Hancock did not wind up being what I thought he would be this year necessarily, but his versatility and ability to free up downs wound up playing a huge role in the defense's success in a different way and is not easily replaceable. Like, this is a huge nickel discussion, is it not? Particularly, as you pointed out, as it relates to downs.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest spot to replace in the back seven. Or the one I have maybe the most questions about, just because of what you said. It's not even me thinking they don't have good players behind Jordan Hancock. It's just like, I think Jordan Hancock was very good, and perhaps a bit underrated for how good he was. So I think it's a big deal. Yeah, they're not short on options, I think, to find somebody who can go there, whether it's Igbinosun moving inside or Lorenzo just being the next guy up, or Aaron Scott, who's like similar to Igbinosun, like kind of longer limbed and taller and fairly physical. Miles Lockhart was recruited like specifically for that position, so like he's a guy to keep in mind there too. So they have some guys. I don't know that I have a great feel for who exactly it's going to be, other than to say like the logical thing is just to assume that it'll be Lorenzo Styles because he was the backup last year.
So was he good?
I didn't think he was great in coverage, but I think he's good against the run. I think he's a really good blitzer. It did just feel like, and maybe this is what teams do because he's the sixth defensive back on the field. It did feel like when he was in the game, teams tried to throw at him. But he was also like, he's new to the position too. He can get better.
Yeah.
I'm not rating him off by any stretch, but I didn't think he was great in coverage this past year, but I did think he was pretty good in other areas.
PFF isn't the be all end all. 162 snaps, which was 17th in defensive snaps on the team. Bad PFF grade, good run defense grade, bad coverage grades. And I think it's like, once you get into that, it's like, okay, he's the dime, he's the backup nickel. He's played college football, even though it's like a position switch, but like he's been around. And if you think going into the year, that's what it's going to be. I think once you get to the middle of the year, it's like, you've got to continue that, even if it's not perfect. Because what were you going to do? Because like when you put that guy in the game, like you can't have him be picked on. And I think he might have been the best option in the midst of this season. I actually don't think he'll be the starting nickel next year.
Okay. I think, I actually wonder if he might move the safety too. I think that could be, you hate to see a guy like move around as much as he's moved. Like you got to find a spot. I think if he takes some steps in coverage, he can and maybe will be the starting nickel. If he doesn't, maybe he's more of a situational player, which is fine. Because like I said, I think he's a good blitzer. I wouldn't mind putting him out there, getting pretty creative with it and bringing him off the edge sometimes from depth. But I don't know that I want him out there playing 400 coverage snaps in a season.
Yes. That's what I think.
Yeah.
And I also think, right, it's, you can kind of line up a young corner and say like, go cover that guy. And I think they have like multiple guys right in that room who are like, maybe they're picking up the intricacies of the defense, but I think they can cover. They can man up, or they can draw, break on a ball. So I am very intrigued by moving Davis and Igbinosun inside and then having Jermaine Matthews be an outside corner, obviously for sure. And then letting Devin Sanchez and Bryce West fight it out and having either a first-year guy or a second-year guy being the other starting outside corner, or really being open to moving guys around. Sometimes Igbinosun's inside, sometimes he's outside. And then when he's inside, one of the young guys is in, but maybe Styles is in. Maybe they go 3 linebackers. Maybe Downs is in the box. Maybe he's like maybe less set with 5 starters in the secondary. I just think, no offense to Lorenzo Styles, I think they can do better. And I think they have more talent. They have 5 stars in that room, like waiting, who I think can play early.
Yeah, I think they could be more versatile on the back end of the defense. Like the only guy who never comes off the field is Caleb Downs, and otherwise you can get pretty funky with it if you wanted to. Because you have Matthews, Igbinosun. I think Aaron Scott's probably ready to play. Bryce West, popped a little bit when he got out there. And then Devin Sanchez looks like a freshman who's going to push for playing time immediately. So that's 5 guys there around Caleb Downs. And then and then that doesn't say anything about like Jalen McClain, who I thought looked pretty comfortable playing as a true freshman. I know Matt Guerreri really likes Leroy Roker. And then there's like Fahim Delane as a freshman who is pretty highly rated. Like there's some young guys there too. So it's maybe more like malleable than I was anticipating, but there's some pretty high end talent guys there on that back end.
Are we potentially at the point where just having Davis and Igbinosun line up as an outside corner and just try to cover a guy man to man is just not the thing that's going to be best for this defense?
I don't know, like because of the penalties. Like,
yeah,
I think when he's not committing pass interference penalties, he's pretty good. So,
yeah, no, I agree.
It's not like he gives up a bunch of receptions and has a lot of penalties. It's like he either has a penalty or he makes the play and he tackles really well. So
right.
I really do like what he brings from a tackling perspective on the perimeter. I would hate to lose that entirely unless you tell me like absolutely for sure. And I think Jermaine Matthews tackles well, but if you're going to tell me that between Aaron Scott and Devin Sanchez and Bryce West, you're going to find another really good tackler or two out there, then I'd be comfortable. But Davis Igbinosun's a very good tackler, and that matters.
The penalties are just like, again, so people know, like they are crazy. Like it's not just like a anecdotal, it drives Ohio State fans crazy kind of thing. I just want to double check this before we move on. This is hard to believe, and I think we've talked about it during the year. Power 4, 68 teams. Every single cornerback. I'm sorting this on PFF. Number of penalties. Number 2 in most penalties among cornerbacks are two guys who are tied at 8. First in most penalties is Davison Igbinosun with 16. He had twice as many penalties as any other cornerback in the country. And I know he played a few more games, but that's crazy. And I like one a game is like reaching the point of like, this can affect your ability to win. Can it not?
You don't have to isolate at the corners. According to PFF, he's the most penalized defensive player in college football. And the next closest had 11. He had 16.
Like it's something. Like it has to. Like it can lose you a game. I think it's gonna. Yeah. Like because sometimes it's like you get obsessed with things. It's like whatever. It's like I think this is a real thing. So and the real.
He only had 6 the year before. So and he had 3 in his year at Ole Miss. So maybe it was just a bad year.
Okay, but I don't think you can just stand by and just throw him back at outside corner without like having long discussions about this. Be like, well, sometimes you're going to get 16 penalties. What are you going to do?
Yeah, I mean, Josh Simmons was the most penalized player at San Diego State until he wasn't, right? So I think that's true. You can coach that out of guys.
John, this is again about Hancock. How concerned are you guys about the nickel spot? Jordan Hancock was so great in that role and so versatile. Hancock, in my opinion, is going to be maybe the biggest loss on the defense next year, as there is no clear replacement that I feel good about. It's like and he's talking about again his ability to move around. Like in terms of clear replacement, it's a very interesting point, right?
Yeah, because and it's not a conversation about like who's better, Jack Sawyer and JT or Jordan Hancock. It's how solid do you feel the next guy up is, and I think you'd feel probably slightly better about like Arvell Reese replacing Cody Simon and Kenyatta Jackson and Caden McDonald and Edric Houston and Caden Curry than the potential of like 3 or 4 guys, but still uncertainty replacing Jordan Hancock.
Yeah, I think that's right. People excited about Jermaine Matthews. This is Zechariah. Denzel Burke was good this year, don't get me wrong, but while Jermaine Matthews when he rotated in, there wasn't a huge drop-off. A full-time role and more experience should make him even better. Another year for Igbinosun should also yield improvements. But like this is Zechariah saying he thinks that corner is the spot that has the chance to be most improved for Ohio State in 2025. And then Brutest Buckeye, really looking forward to Jermaine Matthews taking over. I believe he has the best chance of doing something great next year. Do you think he can be great? Can he play on an all Big Ten level, do you think?
Jermaine?
Yeah, Jermaine.
Yeah. I think he can. I agree. The corner could be the position that improves the most. I like Denzel Burke. I think he had a fine year. He had a bad Oregon game, but I think he had a fine year aside from that. I think ceiling wise, like Igbinosun's is higher. I think Matthews is higher. I think Sanchez is higher. And maybe even like Aaron Scott, I think was a 5-star guy too, right? There's just Tim Walton's recruiting really well, man. So it's I think they could be better there for sure.
I thought the corners were going to be awesome, and they kind of weren't. Ben's expressing this a little bit. I feel like our corners were really not great in man-to-man coverage and seemed to really struggle to pass off their guy in zone. Watching all the games over again, we got carved up by everybody on medium throws if our pass rush didn't get home. I can honestly only think of 2 legitimate pass breakups from the corners this year. They weren't bad, but I thought they were going to be excellent, and I don't think they were excellent, which just means there is room for the corners to be better.
Yeah, I mean, I'd have to go back and watch. I guess I don't know that I would say that they were carved up in any game aside from the Oregon game, and that was mostly like they got the ball thrown over their heads on one guy in particular. But I would agree that they weren't as good as. I mean, I thought they had 2 first-round corners, right? And
So did I.
Denzel Burke's not going to go in the first round, and Igbinosun's going to have to answer some questions in this coming season, I think, to push for that too. So from that perspective, like, yeah, that's probably, it wasn't quite as good as I thought it was going to be. I don't think it was bad. It was probably, I don't know, more closer to like average or good than I was anticipating.
Yeah. Sam, is Devin Sanchez really the real deal? I've heard folks talk about elite talent. Can he guard Jeremiah Smith one-on-one? I do think like that's, if Jeremiah Smith is like the ultimate of what a true freshman can be for an elite college football team, there's certainly going to be some discussions during this year of like Devin Sanchez being the Jeremiah Smith of the defense. That's impossible. But if he earns a real role,
Berm thinks it.
So if Berm thinks that he'll start, Berm thinks he's going to, okay, if he's going to be Jeremiah Smith, you've got to be an every down starter.
He's going to be hard to keep off the field, I think, is the thought. Yeah.
Okay. So then now we're talking about, so now we are moving. Then we have to move Igbinosun inside. Because otherwise, what are we doing here?
You can rotate corners.
Okay. But if he's Jeremiah Smith, you don't rotate Jeremiah Smith.
Yeah.
Right?
That's true.
I mean, it's like, what are we talking about? So like, I mean, like if Berm's really like Berm is using Jeremiah Smith, he's saying that?
Yeah. He said it. Yeah.
Okay. So then if it's Jeremiah Smith, then it's like, you can't come off the field. Like you're a game changer. Jeremiah Smith was like 4th on offensive snaps this year behind 3 offensive linemen. Like Jeremiah Smith played more than Emeka Ibuka did. Like Jeremiah Smith didn't come off the field. So, okay. Like if that's that, then Igbinosun has to play inside. Or you're rotating Jermaine Matthews and David Igbinosun through a spot. If it's really that, like this guy's got to play.
Yeah, I think you're right. But if Devin Sanchez and Jermaine Matthews are outside with Igbinosun inside, I think that's pretty good.
Yeah. So what do you think of this defense? Like, should people is this a championship level defense? And that is a loaded word, but I think there can also be a difference. The defense in 2024 was a defense that could lead them to a championship. Maybe, I think there's a defense the difference between something that can lead you to a championship and something that is good enough to be championship level if you have other things that are also working really well. And then there are just like, it's really good, but it's not good enough to be that. What do you think of this defense?
I would say, like, I don't think it's going to be something that Ohio State has to like overcome.
Okay.
I think probably in the middle there, where you describe like good enough to be championship level, but maybe not the thing that really drives it. I think that'll be more offensive this year compared to last year. But I think the back 7 of this defense, I think should be pretty freaking good. It's just the line and some line depth, and I guess a little uncertainty of like exactly like configuration and what that's going to look like with Matt Patricia taking over now. But I think there's some talent there, especially at defensive tackle, and I like Kenyatta Jackson a lot. So maybe the defensive line will not be quite as good as it was this past season, but I think the back 7 could potentially be better.
Who will be the 4 best players on the defense in 2025? And I think there's 2 options.
Caleb Downs and Sonny Styles. Yeah, Caleb Downs and Sonny Styles. I would probably then go maybe Jermaine Matthews and Edric Houston.
Okay.
Arvell Reese hovering around the conversation.
Okay. That's interesting. I like that. And then we'll put we'll have like a Devin Sanchez alert. We'll have a Igbinosun figures it out alert. I don't think what's the weak spot? Is there a weak spot? Like where should people be the most concerned, or like when spring football comes around, be looking the hardest at this defense?
I would say defensive tackle depth and the defensive end spot opposite Kenyatta Jackson.
Okay. You really feel like you think Jalen McClain's got it. That second safety spot is not going to be as much of an issue.
I think they'll be okay. Yeah.
Okay. So why don't we read this one more time, Mike? If you want to put up the first team defense again, Landis, you can run through this. If people just want to write this down, sometimes you want to write something down, you laminate it, you put it in your wallet, you put it in your purse, you put it in your glove box, you put it in your sock drawer, or whatever. Sometimes you just need to reference, who did Landis say was going to start on defense in 2025? These are the 11.
Okay. Starting 11 for the defense. I have Kenyatta Jackson at end, Caden McDonald and Edric Houston at tackle, Caden Curry at the other defensive end spot. The two starting linebackers, Sonny Styles and Arvell Reese. And then in the secondary, Davison Igbinosun and Jermaine Matthews outside corner, Lorenzo Styles as the nickel, Caleb Downs and Jalen McClain at safety.
Lovely looking graphic there with all the faces there, Mike. Thanks for doing that. Second team,
Logan George transfer at defensive end, CJ Hicks at the other defensive end spot, moving from linebacker, tackles Tywone Malone and Jason Moore. Linebackers on the second team, Peyton Pierce and freshman Riley Pettijohn. Secondary for the second team, Bryce West and freshman Devin Sanchez outside at corner, Aaron Scott at nickel, Malik Hartford and Leroy Roker at safety.
What do you think of the fact that your top 22, there's only one transfer in from this offseason in Logan George?
It feels right to me.
Yeah. Like that,
I don't know.
It's like a healthy defense, right?
Yeah. The only thing portal wise that Ohio State didn't do that I thought it might do is another defensive tackle.
Okay.
And maybe they'll do that after spring.
Okay.
I know they looked at Dylan Thieneman, but that was just sort of like the best safety in the portal might be interested in you. I think you have to take that phone call kind of thing. But I don't know that was done out of like, we need a safety, because they didn't really look at anybody else.
Okay. So that's interesting. And again, like if you guys did not watch or listen to Kings of the North on Wednesday, we compared Ohio State, Penn State, Notre Dame, and Oregon because they all have 10.5 over/under win totals right now. And Oregon is just like a completely rebuilt team. And it's just like they're in such a different spot than a team like Ohio State, that Ohio State's losing a lot, but they're rebuilding from within. Oregon's losing a ton and is just like they rebuilt their secondary last year. They're rebuilding it again this year. It's quite and we didn't talk about that specifically, Landis. We talked more about like, how many guys are going to be back. But in this context, the idea that Ohio State's rebuilding with guys in the building and Oregon's rebuilding with transfers is really interesting.
It is interesting. Yeah. But I think Ohio State laid a nice blueprint for it too. Like they played some guys that are going to be pretty important to this year's defense who are backups in 2024, but they played them a decent amount. Like I said on KOTN, like I don't know that Ohio State's always done a great job of doing that, but like Jermaine Matthews and Arvell Reese and Edric Houston and Caden McDonald playing as much as they played this past year, I think really matters. And it has me feeling like pretty okay about the personnel they have on defense.
Michigan's done a really good job of that over the years. I think that was like that's a good and it's the most important thing is it helps you in a 16-game season in that year, trying to keep guys fresh, but it also pays off down the line. Brian asked this. I don't have this answer specifically. The question I would have goes back to the stat you put out earlier about returning experience in terms of top 30 snaps. Do we know how that compares to past Ohio State teams or how it compares to past national champions? So I don't. I can delve more into the top 30, but just to repeat some of the things we said on KOTN, for these four teams that are the four best teams in the North, Ohio State has 13 of its top 30 back. Oregon has 10 of its top 30 back. Penn State and Notre Dame have 17 of their top 30 back, but actually Notre Dame has like 3 other guys who were projected starters that got hurt. Like Notre Dame has a ton back. But I do think, again, Ohio State does not have as much back as Notre Dame or Penn State. Ohio State does not have as much back as it did a year ago. But they have more back than Oregon, and that they're building from within. We are really want to do some more off-season roster stuff. I think this is very I'm really thinking about this now, Landis. That again, it became kind of a weird thing, and I think Ohio State fans knew it the whole time that Ohio State's 2024 team was about the guys who were back, as we said a million times. However, their two best players were a transfer from Alabama and a true freshman. But this is still a program built from within, and Will Howard really mattered, and Quinshon Judkins really mattered, and Josh Simmons 2 years ago really mattered. We understand all of that. But this offseason, I think, is even more proof of that. If maybe like a year ago, you could have looked at Ohio State adding Judkins and Howard and Downs and compared that to Oregon adding Derek Harmon and Jabbar Muhammad and Evan Stewart and thought it was similar, it's so dissimilar right now with what Oregon, Ohio State are doing to rebuild for 2025. It's kind of put that to rest.
It's kind of crazy. Like, all of what Ohio State's losing, especially on defense. Like I think the college football world might have been half expecting Ohio State to add like 16 transfers this offseason.
Yes.
And what did they add? 5? And only 1 on defense.
Yeah.
Like,
it's like if you don't get it, it's still strategic. It's not, they're not carpet bombing. It's still strategic. It's like, oh, they're a little short on tight end and whatever. It's like, oh, they got like the best tight end in the portal. Okay. That makes sense, right? Yeah. And then having to get a quarterback last year because McCord didn't work out quite like you thought it would, I think put a spin on things. But again, like you're looking at stuff, that's not what they're doing. Like that's not the plan now. Now it's like, is Julian saying a transfer? Yes, but it's not the same thing as getting an established multi-year starting quarterback from another team. Like they're building. They're building Julian Sand up. All right. So that's our defensive thing. We have a couple other questions from the tech subscribers. Landis, you have a couple more minutes?
I do. If producer Mike doesn't, he can bounce if he'd like to, and I can end the show. Just putting that out there for him.
Lovely. How about that? Very kind. I can't end the show because I am technically insufficient.
Yep.
This is from Chris. How much would someone have to pay you to run a marathon? You get as much time as you need to prepare for it. You can also run it as slow as you want, but you need to finish before the cutoff, which is usually like 7 or 8 hours, and you have to maintain a jogging motion, no walking.
I mean, I don't know that I could do it. So what could they pay me for? Yeah, if I felt like I could actually do it, I don't know, a couple $1,000 maybe I'd try to do it.
Yeah. Because it's not you just put podcast in your ears. You know what I mean? Like It's boring to do all that stuff. Like, I could do it. I would do it. My joints hurt, but I could do like a half walk, half jog. But if you said, how much would someone have to pay you to do like 25 push-ups? Then I'd be like, I don't know if I don't think I can do 25 push-ups.
Yeah.
My arms are like noodles. I don't know what to tell you.
I'm not busting out 25 push-ups.
Yeah. So,
my strength is in the lower body, not the upper body.
Yeah. You got a nice core. You got a nice core there. Yeah. Because I did, as everyone knows, not everyone knows because you don't have to know about my life, but I did once in my life run a half marathon at Disney World, and I kind of hurt my knee kind of early in the race. And at the end, as we got to the giant Epcot ball to finish the race, a woman dressed as Tinkerbell who was wearing a walking boot passed me. So the only half marathon I've ever run, I lost to a woman dressed as a fairy in a walking boot. I was slower than a person in a walking boot.
That's hilarious.
So yes, you'd have to pay me to run a marathon. Yeah. This I thought was an interesting one. And I don't even know if this is true. I believe it because CB says it so. Why does the shoe, Ohio Stadium, receive nothing but hate from the fans, but the Rose Bowl is given nothing but praise? Both stadiums are over 100 years old and are filled with tons of history. It just seems like people love to point out the shortcomings of Ohio Stadium any chance they get, and you never hear anything bad about the Rose Bowl.
I think if you went to the Rose Bowl 8 times a year, you would.
I think you would too. That is, I think that's the right answer. Sunsets and that the Rose Bowl is special. And I will say, before I moved here to cover Ohio State, I lived on the East Coast, and my wife's family is from Iowa, and we would drive sometimes. And so one time we were just driving on 70 from Pennsylvania to Iowa, and I was like, you know what? Can we just take a little detour? And this was like about a year before the year before I got hired to cover Ohio State. And I just was like, I would just like to go to Ohio Stadium. Like we're driving right past it. It's going to be 15 minutes out of the way. Is it okay if we stop? Because I was like, it's freaking Ohio Stadium.
Yeah.
So if it's unfamiliar, so I can speak from experience, and there's a lot of people watching and listening to this who can't because it's always been Ohio Stadium to you. If you grew up an Ohio State fan and you just started going when you were a kid or whatever, it's freaking Ohio Stadium when it is unfamiliar.
Yeah.
I wasn't like, man, this place is falling apart. I was like, it's Ohio Stadium. Oh my God, this is awesome. So I think you're right. And I also will say, having now been out to more stadiums with what we're doing on Kings of the North, I think I actually have a greater appreciation for Ohio Stadium because there are a lot. Most stadiums are old. Most
college football stadiums are, yeah.
Most
they don't
stadiums,
turn
it
them
feels
over
like
the NFL does.
No, right. And they built the concourses for people when they were 5'5", and they didn't have 19 pop-up boba tea stands in the middle of the concourse. And you think to yourself, this is not how I would design this now. Ohio Stadium stacks up pretty well. Like there's a lot of inconveniences in college football stadiums. So I guess I would say I don't know who CB is referring to, if it's Ohio State fans who go there a lot, if it's national media who say the shoes, I don't know what. I actually think Ohio Stadium stacks up pretty well. And I hope people appreciate it because, maybe someday it won't be there, but it's just part of the deal with college football. Everything's old.
Yeah. I guess I can't speak to it. I'm trying to think the amount of times I've been in Ohio Stadium where I wasn't working, and it's like maybe one or two for concerts. So like I don't actually know what the game day experience is like for a fan, like getting from your seat, getting concessions, getting to the bathroom, all that kind of stuff. So like if that sucks, I don't know that. I've never experienced it. But in terms of like cool place to be, cool place to see a game, historic venue, like it definitely hits for me almost every time I walk in there still. But yeah, every stadium's old. Like, and there are some real hunks of junk out there. Like I think like Beaver Stadium, I think sucks. It's loud, but it's not a game. Yeah. I don't want to pay money to go sit in there and watch a game. So like, I don't know. I think Ohio Stadium holds up pretty well against most college football stadiums.
Yeah. This is Ben. We'll just do a couple more of these. If you had to pick one road trip for the upcoming season, what game would you be going to? Taking into account both football and non-football factors. So Ohio State, 5 road trips this coming season: at Washington, at Illinois, at Wisconsin, at Purdue, at Michigan. And I think like we can throw out Michigan because it's like going to Michigan Stadium for an Ohio State Michigan game is like, I'm sure if you're an Ohio State fan, you want to go to every Ohio State Michigan game you can. But also I think it would be a bucket list item to be like, I want to go to the opposing place. Yeah. And also I think the Big House is awesome. So like I want to go there for that game, even if you've been to Ohio Stadium. So like, let's discard that. Illinois, Washington, Wisconsin, and Purdue. Where are you going?
Washington. I've never been to the state of Washington, let alone the University of Washington. But it's also supposed to be like an awesome place to see a game. I know like they have the sailgating there, right? You can take your boat up to the stadium. I've heard incredible things about the atmosphere. I'd imagine for that game it'll be pretty good. And I'd like to go to Seattle because there's a lot of things to do there, I hear. So that'd be number 1 for sure. I guess number 2 would be Wisconsin because I like Madison. Yeah.
Madison's cool. Washington, I think, is definitely the answer. And if like, again, this is actual for Ben or for other people. It's like, this is a consideration that people make. I know a lot of Ohio State fans who try to make a road trip every year. Absolutely. I've been there once when Ohio State played non-conference there in 2007. Seattle's cool. The stadium's cool. It's different. Great vibe, great fans. I would definitely say Washington.
That'd be like a more affordable trip than Oregon, right? Because it's like in a major city, like a lot of hotels, better flight options, right? Like Oregon, I heard like getting to Oregon was not dissimilar from trying to get to like Penn State. Just like kind of isolated and small and hard to stay anywhere near it. Yeah.
So, and then the other thing I would say is if you are the kind of person who likes to plan Ohio State road trips as a Buckeye fan, I would start saving your money for Austin. To go to Texas in 2026 is an experience too. Like, so, that's a rare one. It's like maybe you take this year off and save up the money so you can go to Texas next. I don't know, but that would be one I think to put on your bucket list to see the Buckeyes and Longhorns play at their place next season.
Yeah.
There's only so much disposable income that people have. We'll finish with this. So this is Lloyd sending this in previous, and we can wrap up with a little Patricia talk and then something else. Do you think hiring someone outside of the staff for the DC position is even more critical due to the fact that they just made an internal hire for OC and the fact the odds are the best candidate for both of these jobs are not just down the hall, right? So it's the stuff we talked about. Yeah. In the end, we agree. We think that factored in.
I think it did. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I agree with that too. His balance matters. And then last thing from Lloyd, who is more vindicated, Ryan Day after winning the national title or Doug as Chili's is absolutely having a moment in the cultural zeitgeist, which I think is a fact. Like
what's
Chili's
going on
is
with
back.
Chili's?
They're just back. They're just like their social media account. Like they had a score bug thing for some of the stuff. Like they're just like TGI Fridays is dying. It makes me sad. I love TGI Fridays. And you can barely find them anymore, right? I can't. There's no Fridays near me.
The only Fridays I ever went to with any kind of regularity was the one that's in the hotel in Indianapolis, and that's closed.
Yeah. So I'm sad about Fridays. Applebee's is still around, but I think Applebee's is inferior.
I gotta say, I had Applebee's when I drove up to go cover the Notre Dame Indiana game. And I got Applebee's for dinner. It was pretty good.
Really?
Yeah, I just got a couple apps. It was pretty tasty.
Oh, that's a smart call.
Yeah.
Just like at Chili's, sometimes the Triple Dipper app is the way to go. But I do think, and like Max and Irma's, which was like an Ohio staple once upon a time, died. Yeah. There's one Max and Irma's in Ohio that my family has gone out of its way to go to in Lancaster, Ohio, because we love Max and Irma's. Those chain restaurants, man, like you got to appreciate
Tuesday
them.
Still exist? I like them.
I don't know. There used to be one near us. It's not there anymore. So it might be dead. So many of Chili's competitors and peers are dead or dying, and that Chili's has had a comeback, right? I think it really says something. And I'm not saying I'm taking credit for it. I'm not saying it's because of me, but I will give myself a shout out for riding the right horse. Can you imagine if I was like a TGI Fridays guy, talking about TGI Fridays all the time? I was like, oh yeah, it's dead. I feel like
did you ever consider like getting off the Chili's train?
Never, not once. Even though they took away my favorite salad, never once.
Yeah. Okay.
We got wings for the Super Bowl and got Chili's appetizers because the Southwest egg rolls are so good. So good. 2 stops. Sometimes you gotta make 2 stops for your Super Bowl. All right, that'll do it. New defensive coordinator for Ohio State. Happy to run through the defensive depth chart thanks to the work of Bill Landis and the great graphics from producer Mike. We'll be back next week doing this on the offensive side of the ball. We got some stuff to talk about. For now, thanks to you guys for being here. Thanks for being a part of everything we do on the podcast, both on YouTube and on our podcast channels. Thanks as always to producer Mike for all his hard work on this show. And we will see you guys soon. For now, he's Bill Landis. I'm Doug Lesmerises, and that was Kings of Columbus.